Carla, you ready? Good evening, friends, neighbors, and guests. Welcome to the meeting. It's a budget meeting and a commission meeting. Is it, the mic's on? Are the mics on? Okay.
Test.
Okay, we're now? Okay. We have a budget meeting and a commission meeting this evening on Monday, September the 9th. Carla, would you do the roll call, please?
Commissioner Bessler,
Here.
Commissioner DeHassett,
Present.
Commissioner Herbert,
Here.
Vice Mayor Magruder.
Here.
Let the record show Mayor Koss is absent with notice.
Please rise and we'll do the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag Well, I was informed that since I am acting mayor for the evening, that I was honored by having three prior mayors join us, Jim Bonfiglio, Digby Bridges, and Gail Askoff. So I thank you very much for coming to my support. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we want to remove item number 4, the ordinance regarding synthetic turf. The Planning and Zoning Commission needs to rework the ordinance before it is brought up at the town commission level.
Okay.
And also, I believe we have an addition under presentations for Palm Beach Cares.
Yes, we do. Any other additions or deletions?
Speak up is what she's asking, you really can't.
Oh, I'm sorry. Still? Can you hear me now?
I think it's just because your microphone's not close enough to your mouth.
Okay. I'll move closer. My wife complains all the time that she can't hear me, but I think that's kind of a domestic problem that all of us have. Okay, then can I get a motion to approve the agenda with the two changes as mentioned?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all approve?
Aye.
Okay, passed unanimously. Okay, let's move to the presentations. Chief, I believe you have the first one.
It's my pleasure to introduce everybody to our newest police officer, Stetson Marsh. Stetson is a local, born in West Palm Beach, recently graduated from the police academy, joined us on August the 26th, very important date. On September the 1st, we made him move in. Spent a couple days, 48 hours living with us, and I got rave reviews about his interactions on the bridges and with the residents, and he still showed up after that.
On the second presentation, Mayor Koss has asked Jim Bonfiglio, a member of bipartisan collaborative known as the Palm Beach County Cares, to act as liaison for Ocean Ridge in the collection of supplies needed for the Bahamas. I've asked Jim to give a brief presentation of his mission in this regard. Jim?
Hello, Commissioners, Vice Mayor, Mayor, and past mayors and community members. It's a pleasure to be back here once again in the chambers, even though I'm on the wrong side of the dais this time. You all may recall during Hurricane Maria, in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, we created what's called Palm Beach County Cares, which is a group of community leaders in Palm Beach County, elected officials, business leaders, things of that nature, to help coordinate the volunteer efforts to bring donations and things to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. It was very successful. We partnered with Tropical Lines and the Bahamas Cruise Lines to ferry goods and materials back and forth to the islands. I mean, actually, one of our residents, Rich Lucibella, volunteered his plane to deliver emergency medical supplies and bring some folks who needed emergency medical treatment from the islands to the United States. Well, there's another pressing need now as a result of the last hurricane in the Bahamas. So we decided to get the band back together again, if you will. We've got Palm Beach County Cares back together again. If you recall, the town hall was a designated drop-off spot for a collection spot for donations. I've asked the mayor and the town manager to allow the town to be a drop-off spot again. I've brought some goods myself today, dropped them off in the front hall. I'm sure it's not the first and it's probably not the most generous, but it's a start. Let's be as generous, open up your hearts and your wallets for the folks in the Bahamas who desperately need it. We had a meeting yesterday at the Port of Palm Beach Commission Chambers. They were discussing some of the bad things that are happening over there. They have no electricity. As a matter of fact, they aren't even going to try to repair the electrical service over there. They're just going to have to rebuild because it's such a mess. So they have no electricity. I would discourage folks, if you have your own private boats and you plan to bring up your own supplies and over there, not to do that because number one, if you can find a dock, especially in Abacoa, which is one of the most devastated islands, if you can find a dock, and if you can find that it has gas pumps, you're not going to be able to get the gas into your boat because there's no electricity to run the pumps. So unless you can make sure that you have extra gas to get back and forth, and that's one of the most westernmost islands, you know, it's just going to be a nightmare. Plus, you have all the flotsam and jetsam floating out there that you're going to have to avoid getting back and forth. So we're going to collect money to book one of the cruise ships, about $300,000 for a trip over there. We're going to collect the donations from all the local spots, bring them up to either the warehouse in Military and Congress or over at Port of Palm Beach, bundle everything, put it on a ship, and send it over there. And that's probably going to be the best way, I think, to do it rather than these private enterprises trying to get over there. So I want to thank you all for being so generous as to allow the town to be a collection spot for donations. If you get a little overloaded, give me a call. I'll make sure everything gets picked up within 24 hours of the call. Thank you so very much. It's a pleasure again to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Tracy, can we put the list of items on the website?
Absolutely.
Okay, and so that you all can see that. Talking about the hurricane, we missed a big one. We really did. There were a number of folks that stayed in town, a number that left, but I will want to congratulate the chief, the administrative staff, the Public Works Department, and those new officers that decided to stay room and board with us for 4 or 5 days. You did a fantastic job, and we really appreciate the effort that you all put forth in protecting both the citizens and the property. And it went as smooth as could be, and fortunately, it was a very good test of things that may come yet. So you can feel comfortable that these people that we have working for us have our backs. So thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
And last but not least, these guys and girls, ladies, excuse me, went off and left their families to fend for themselves. So while we applaud the staff for staying and protecting us, we really need to thank their families for being able to fend for themselves while their husbands and wives were here looking after us. So make sure that you tell them that they were recognized in this evening's meeting.
I will pass it on.
Okay, Carla, you want to read the announcements, please?
The next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting will be held on October 21st at 8 a.m. at Town Hall. The next regular Town Commission meeting will be held October 7th at 6 p.m. at Town Hall, and a special meeting will be held on September 23rd at 5 p.m. and will include the final public hearing and adoption of the budget for FY20. The next Septic to Sewer Citizens Advisory Committee meeting will be held on September 18th at 8:30 a.m. at Town Hall. The town has launched the new alert system, Civic Ready. Residents who wish to sign up to receive town notification should sign up on the town's website or call Town Hall for assistance. Next on the agenda is public comment. The mayor will invite for the public to speak to the commission on any item that is not printed on the agenda. Public comment on a specific agenda item may be made later in the meeting when the items are taken up. There's a 3-minute individual limit for public comments that will be timed by the town clerk. Public comment is not meant to be question and answer period, and there will be no dialogue. Anyone wishing to speak during public comment, please come up to the podium, print your name and address on the sheet provided, and state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlin. Public comments, Mr. Bridges.
I'm here for two reasons. The first is what I feel is a major reason, tree preservation in this town. We recently had a tree slaughtered. Can you show the picture of? And it was, I don't know how it happened, but somehow the town arrived at the conclusion from the arbor expert, that it was not a banyan, but I forget the name here. No, I haven't got it there. He hasn't got it on the list. It's not a banyan, but another ficus. Now, this is the ficus that it was, the town gave. This is the ficus leaf that really was the one that was classified by the botanist as the tree. This is a banyan leaf. I've been to 3 architectural landscapers and 2 nurseries. This is the banyan tree, it's what I heard. I don't know how this came amiss. I don't know who employed this so-called arborist expert, but it's appalling what happened to that tree. So what I'd like to say is I'd like this town to start, number one, purchasing a lot of little trees. You don't need big trees, and they've got to be, give them a big choice of sea grape, mahogany, live oaks, etc. They all, the black olive, they all work very well, certain near the coast, certain's not near the coast. So I would like the town to do that, but more important, we've got to get an ordinance that protects every tree in this town, big ones. I've been through the county lists today, and I can't find where ficus are banned. It's all the other ones except ficus. So did anybody do that research? Which I've done, and found that the county do not apparently have any ban. It's a tree that can be planted. Frigid, it's not a nuisance tree. So I'd like to do that. I'd like to see trees like this large almond tree down the road here, which is a beautiful tree. It's on a lot, it's on the side, doesn't be disturbed. It can work. The trees like that are going to be protected. When I see people here just over the road protecting a lovely banyan again by building a house around it, I love that. So the town has got to bring that in. It's got to do it. I would help on it, help classify them, or help see the ones we should keep, but we should not go with the county at all. We should be ourselves. Imagine what Ocean Ridge would look like without the ficus. It'd be virtually a desert. So please look at that and listen to what I have to say. The next thing is our bridge on Sable Island. All the various bridges have seemed to be dollied up, and Harbour Drive seems to have got $5,000 for its entrance. We lost all our vegetation around our bridge in Hurricane Francis. Since then, nothing has been done. It took out the coca plums we had there, mid left one. And it took everything else out, except the one coca plant, which now has been pruned by the people in the muses there, when it's really our tree. My idea is that we should get, because all the other bridges have had money spent on, we would like to implement this plan where we do the sea grape here, cause an arch for our entrance, then a couple of leaving this cocoa plum, putting another one here, then here putting a banyan. Now, I don't know what's been done about this. The gentleman here cut down a beautiful banyan, about 12 feet in radius, and a beautiful sea grape, big, more than 12 feet. It's cut down, you can see the stumps. Has the town done anything? Has he been contacted to replant them? I don't think so. So I'd like two then I'd like us to be able to put two sea grape, sable palms, and sable farms. We don't want the sea grapes too big because, and the coca plums, because they actually, in fact, grow faster if they're little, because the bigger ones you put in at 12 feet go into shock, and the little ones catch them up within 2 years. They don't have that shock. So I would like the Commission to think of implementing a plan like this. As we know, the Northern Ireland had its bridge really dolled up. The Middle Ireland here had its bridge really dolled up. The entrance south had its entrance given $5,000 recently. I would like the Commission to consider that as well, but very important is protect the trees of this town. I was told, while I read it, that if everybody in America planted one tree, and Europe, including Europe, planted one tree a year, the crisis of oxygen, carbon thing would be gone. There would be no problem. It's the trouble with cutting down the trees at a rate of thing and not replanting. This government here has millions of acres. We should encourage them, all of us, to plant trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Digby. As you know, we have later in the agenda, we have a presentation by Commissioner Halbert on historic trees within the town, and so we'll bring it back up at that point. Good evening.
Good evening. Excuse me. Tom Perry, 19 Harbor Drive South. First of all, I was lucky enough to be out of town when Dorian hit. When I did return probably a day early on Tuesday, we were still receiving the southern bands and everything. And I mean, the first thing I saw when I got to the bridge was our police there, and they were at all the boundaries of the town. And I just want to really, again, expound upon what you said, Mr. Magruder, to how your men did a great job. We're really grateful for that, and thank you very much. On another note, I'd just like to bring to attention, I'm sure y'all have been through this before, the season's coming, and these cyclists on the weekends in the large groups of 50, 60, or 100 going up and down A1A. I've had some problems with them last year. It's very dangerous. It's a potential hazard. Eventually, it's not if, it's when somebody's going to get hurt seriously or killed in large groups. I think it's great that we have bike paths and the paths going north and south, and I love the groups going, but more than 10 or 15 in a group, and they're going wide, and they get pretty vicious out there too. And I know this is probably a state problem or state issue, but the large groups, over 10, it's just too many. You know, and it's a hazard. The elderly people that are driving up and down A1A are not used to that. When you have to get past the group, and then they get rowdy at the intersections, it's just something that I hope you all take note of. And if I could write a letter to the state, the DOD, or whoever, I'd be happy to participate in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Chief, do you have any comment? Would you like to?
Several
make a
of us
comment?
just attended a workshop with the Florida Department of Transportation and put on by the Institute of Police Technology and Management to address this issue. We're working with Boca Raton, Hillsborough Beach, Highland Beach, Gulfstream, Manalapan, Palm Beach, the Sheriff's Office, and the Highway Patrol to once again do what we did a couple of years ago and do an education and enforcement campaign as the season comes in. There are constraints by statute. that allow them to act the way that they do to a certain extent, because we do not have bike lanes. So we're doing educational campaigns, and we'll do that throughout the season. There's another symposium coming up next month. I hope to send a couple more of our officers there. And hopefully you'll see us out there on those weekends and Thursday mornings.
Betty Bingham, 1 East Ocean Avenue. I would just like to second what Digby said, and I think maybe planning or zoning should study the trees, and I think someone should control the elected people that come in to trim trees. They were trimming my tree, they were cutting trees going west, limbs off of it. They said, the tree's dead. I said, the tree's deciduous. They said, what's a deciduous tree? And the limbs were this far easily away from any power, you know, even my wall, which is, and 2 years ago, they cut a limb this size off of my ficus tree, which is against the law. And I could have gone after him and probably should have.
I'd like to make another comment, again, on the bike path.
You want to go?
No, you go, you've got a nice red shirt.
I donate to their football team. Ted Ritoda, 4 Hudson Avenue. First of all, I got 2 things I want to talk about, but I'm glad we're all here after the storm. For some reason, our beach access at Edith Street seems to always get hit the hardest by these storms relative to beach erosion. I don't know if all the commissioners know or not, but I'm making you aware of the fact that the lower portion of our steps on the beach access have been washed away. I know we are in peak hurricane season. It's probably a good time to consider putting some strong support beams down for the future, because there's so much erosion. When the sand comes back, they'll be even sturdier. I would like the commission to instruct the town workers to replace those steps as soon as possible. I have seen people jumping off them already, going around the barrier that's there. It's not a good situation. Just making you aware of that we would like to get that done as soon as possible. Number 2, I'm sorry, but this is a bit repetitive, but my wife and I have composed a letter. Dear Chief Hutchins and all the town staff, my wife and I want to commend everyone for their fantastic work and support during the Dorian hurricane days. Surely those days were taxing on all of us in many ways. In any event, we especially wanted to commend Chief Hutchins and his staff for their continued visibility during the evacuation period. We greatly appreciated that. Having been a resident of Ocean Ridge since 1983, the appreciation for living in such a great Florida community is immeasurable. It continues to be a very special place to live in our state, and one of the reasons is because of our superior public safety department. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll post that for everybody else. Just one quick one. Regarding the bike paths, when I was on the commission, I tried to get through the 4 foot. We must be the only town about that can put the 4 foot in and not disturb anybody. I fought for it that time because I felt that, number one, if the town doesn't put it in, it's going to find itself liable for when a person's killed, because it's possible to put it in. So I would suggest that you get DOT again and get them to relook at this whole road and not allow these people that have plenty of room for the bike path not to do it. We are one of those people. If we have the bike path, the big one, the 4 foot one, would that help us, Chief, with these gangs? I know these gangs come down of about 100.
It would be easier to enforce some of the
The law.
obstruction of traffic if
Yeah.
you had legal bike lanes on both sides of
Exactly,
A1A.
yeah.
It would not, and I need to be very candid.
Yeah. Would not stop them.
It will not completely stop it, because there are times when those bicycles are allowed to be outside of the bicycle lane. So I don't want to give people false hope that that's
But it
the
would help control
end
it.
all be all. It certainly would, and it has in some other areas.
Yeah, so I'd like the town to look into that again, because I was vehemently fought against during that time when I wanted a 4 foot bike path.
On
Thanks.
either side.
Both sides, yes. This path that I got in that goes along the road here was meant to be a bike path under Mangione, thought the idea, and I was in the commission at the time, was put in. But really, it's not a bike path because it'll knock the pedestrians over. It's really much more, and I called it at that time a pedestrian path. So we've got enough room next to the road to put that bike path in. Thanks.
Thank you. Tracy, you've taken notes?
Yes.
Hi, Ron Kern, 5510 North Ocean. I'd just like to add to the accolades about the storm coverage. Being up at our home in Massachusetts and being out of communication, it was great. The number of updates that came from Town Manager Stevens and from Chief Hutchison was a real big help. I mean, we could read what was going on. We felt like we were right up to date. They were timely, and we really appreciated it. It really did help a whole lot. Thank you, both of you.
And with that, I'll just put a plug in for our new Civic Ready alert system. If you had taken part in that and you were on that, you got the alerts. If you weren't, you didn't. So if you didn't get them, try to sign up for that as soon as possible.
Right, real helpful.
Lisa Rotota, 4 Hudson Avenue. I'm up here to say that with the new appointment of Deborah over here as our PR person, go-to person in town, she's going above and beyond. Whenever I'm out there walking, riding my bike, she's out there in her little scooter car, whatever it is, always talking, always a smile on her face, never ever a down frown, ever incredibly personable. But if you haven't read the latest Coastal Star, there's a perfect article about her that just hits the nail on the head exactly of what this town means to all of us, and she's the epitome of what the kind of image we want to present to the town. So well done appointing Deborah for that position.
Terry Brown, whoops, Harbor Drive South. Someone's been chewing on this. I just wanted to also say some great things about the chief and the dispatch, because I called him a few times. My wife and I decided to evacuate to a hotel. And when we were coming back, I said, oh, I got to get my driver's license in so I can go over the bridge. She says, you don't need a driver's license. They know who you are. And they just waved me by.
That could be good or bad.
Anyway, they were great. Your dispatch people were great. I called a few times asking for information. I wanted to just comment basically on what ex-mayor Digby Bridges was talking about trees. And my neighbor happens to be here tonight. It's the reason why I'm bringing it up. We had he and I both had a strangler fig growing between the houses. And we spent money cutting them on my side. He spent money trimming on his side. And it got so big, it was threatening the structure of the house and the septic tank and the drain fields. And fortunately, he had enough money to take it out. So, and it was a huge tree. The chief knows it was an enormous tree. But, and that tree, which is a ficus tree, the strangler fig, is on the prohibited list to plant. But they're all over town because they've been there, the seeds dropped by the raccoons or the birds, and they come up on their own, known as volunteers. And that tree had been there probably 80 years or more. And so they're still around. I support planting everything. I actually have a strangler fig in the front of my house, which is not doing any damage. So I would be one that would support planting any tree anywhere, because when we came here 27 years ago, almost 28 years, there was a lot more native trees around. There's a native feeling around. There was a tropical, you can go by my house, it looks like it's hidden by trees. But that I would support. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Nancy?
Mayor, Commissioners, Nancy Hogan, 37 Hibiscus Way. And I just wanted to come here and get on public record. I have not, and for disclosure, I have not been to any of the sewer project meetings. I fully intend to. Sewers are very expensive, very important for a lot of reasons and many different opinions when it comes to a project like that. I just want to share with you, and this is what I want on public record, that, you know, I hang around with a lot of these crazy folks in the state, and they really think, and I say they as if it's a consensus. It's no consensus, the higher up you go. But that this year is probably the best year that they surmise that something might happen statewide, mandate or whatever, to handle the septics, and of course that's the sewer issues. So I would just ask all of you to pay attention. I will pay attention and share whatever I learn, and I will attend the meetings and make sure that we don't miss a dollar that might come up, because they'll look at us and say, oh, they're rich over there, you know. But we still have a lot of reason to make it right, to help the environment, and a lot of reason to be invested in regarding a project like this. And I think there was one other thing. No, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you that. I was going to give you a little issue. Well, maybe I will. Do you know? You got feeling good tonight, Chief?
So far. We have plenty of time.
All right. I just want to mention that you know, of course, we're grateful. Steve and I are lucky that we have a condo across the way, so we not only can go there and it's up, but we can see what's happening over here. And we did come back over. But what I heard on the TV is that people were furious because they were over here, the press was over here on the beach and putting stress on because people were shut out of coming over here. And of course, people like to see the waves. They like to. So I would just suggest maybe we want to have some positive verbalization when we have to close it down. I appreciate that. I, you know, was afraid of who might be around my house, and it's comforting to know that you're all out there. But there is a whole community who wants their access to the beach. Just to at least mention it, that you understand.
We do. We met all of them on the bridges.
I'm not going to repeat that. All right, thank you.
Bruce Hinden, 5 Sable Island Drive. Feel like I have to stick my 2 cents into everything here. First, as far as the bike riders go, in support of the gentleman, it really is a dangerous situation. Not that I don't support physical activity, I absolutely do. The problem is, it's a 2-lane road. And when the bikers go out more than 2 wide, which I think is the state law, they really force cars into oncoming traffic if you want to get around them. And like you said, if there are pelotons, or whatever the term is, of these multiple riders, then you're in oncoming traffic for a good length of time, and all of a sudden you're coming onto a bluff that you may not even see the other side. So it's dangerous for cars, it's dangerous for the cyclists too. Some of the cyclists have even put out poles on their bikes, you know, 3 feet wide, 4 feet wide. So, you know, even though you're trying to be respectful of them, they're really not trying to be respectful of you. So I think there has to be some sort of give and take. And I've seen police from time to time pull some of the cyclists over, which is probably appropriate. But again, just to avoid any injury or potentially death in the future to drivers or cyclists, I think something more definitive needs to be done, because it seems to be an ongoing problem year after year. As far as support of Digby's concerns, as far as Sable Island Drive, earlier in the year, I think at the end of the first quarter, it's gotten to the point where the Sable Island community actually got together at a neighbor's home. And we had represented greater than 50% of the homeowners, I would say closer to 2/3. And we formed this ad hoc committee for not only for beautification of the island, but for safety too, because we felt nothing was getting done by the commission. You know, for whatever reason, we've been overlooked. The other island, the bridges have been addressed. I don't want to be redundant, but we've certainly taken matters into our own hands and have tried to put plans together for beautification of the island, some lighting that some people felt was inadequate. Neighbors feel unsafe walking their pets at night because it's inadequate lighting. We've tried to contact FP&L to add certain lights to different poles. There's redundancy of poles that haven't been removed from the island. It just seems to be a neglected area by the town commission. Certainly, if we can get some funds allocated to help our efforts, as seems to have been done on every other island, it seems to be fair. We're not asking for anything more or less than what's already been done elsewhere. We've been told that don't even bother asking, there's no money in. But then all of a sudden we find out that money's been allocated to other islands. So I'm not sure how you come to these decisions, but I think Sable Island deserves their fair share. We certainly are trying to put our efforts into the footwork and the groundwork to take care of matters as well. And the last issue is the issue with tree trimming and cutting. This involves my personal property. I had issues because we had a large, what I consider a specimen tree on the island, and try to do the appropriate thing by having an arborist come out and giving us suggestions on the appropriate way to trim the tree. However, my neighbor feels that he wants it cut down. It's fine if you have situations where both people want the tree removed or both people agree to save it. The issue comes in if one person wants it and the other person doesn't. And there's just not clear way to go on the commission. I've been told from the town that if you don't need a permit if you're trimming anything under 6 inches. But anything over 6 inches is considered removal, and then you do need a permit. So the town hired their own arborist to come out to look at my personal situation, and said the tree had been aggressively pruned and putting the specimen in danger. I recently left town, came back only to find out literally the tree had been just about cut in half. So obviously the town either allowed or permitted something against what their own hired arborist had recommended, or there's been a town violation. And I think something should be done because it may have put this particular specimen in jeopardy. And I just want to put the town on notice that these situations will continue to arise unless an ordinance is written directly addressing the issues. Thank you.
Tracy, you've got that information, and it's also the commission with Commissioner Halbert working on it, and Digby getting involved. I think we are in the process of trying to resolve some of those issues with the trees. I know that planning and zoning now, when they do the reviews of the new construction projects and whatnot, are recommending that hardwood, at least 1 or 2 hardwood trees be planted in the landscaping. And so that is a step in the right direction, and will give us more attention on the planning and zoning and with the commission.
I'll jump more on Mark Morris.
I'm sorry?
I'll jump more on Mark Morris.
Exactly.
Don't forget your phone.
Oh, yeah. Gabe, your phone?
Any other comments? Okay, then we'll move on to the budget hearing. Agenda item number 1, tentative budget and proposed millage rate for fiscal year 2019-2020. Tracy, would you please bring us up to speed on this one?
Yes, after several budget workshops held by the commission, the tentative budget for the fiscal year FY 19-20 is submitted for your review, consideration, and action. This budget continues enhanced maintenance activity to our stormwater systems and critical drainage infrastructure projects prioritized by the town commission, along with a focus on fire hydrant maintenance, while also maintaining our landscape maintenance program, as well as the town's current level of visibility for public safety. At the goal-setting workshop in April, the Town Commission heard from the residents and staff and committed to funding other priority capital improvement projects as described on the capital items listing. The majority of the town budget is semi-fixed for personnel and employment multipliers, contracts, intergovernmental obligations, and other ongoing programs and priorities of the town from past priorities, obligations, and legislative direction. Many line items have been increased to accommodate additional special projects and priorities indicated by the commission and the public. Details of these categories have been included in the narratives for each department that was submitted for your review. The overall projected budget expenditures have increased by 12.66% in FY20 due to the enhanced maintenance and drainage infrastructure projects, along with increases to our insurance rates due to our experience ratings for workers' compensation and general liability claims, and also increases in salaries for our personnel based on the salary studies that you reviewed. At a 5.35 mill rate, this year's budget proposes utilizing $296,367 from reserves to balance the budget in order to fund much-needed enhanced maintenance for the town. Using reserves as opposed to receiving funds from state revolving loan fund and paying it back over time with interest not only saves the town money in the long run, but it is also recommended due to the current healthy fund balance that we have in town. All unexpended funds identified as audited at the end of each fiscal year return to the town reserve and can be appropriated for specific allowed purposes per town commission actions as budgeted. Town reserves have typically increased over the past several years. However, those margins and projections have become intentionally tighter to actuarial as of last year. In summary, the commission reviewed and discussed the proposed budget presented by the town manager during several budget meetings and discussed town priorities to incorporate into the tentative budget that has been presented for you and for the public to look at tonight.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on what Tracy just discussed?
Carla, do you want to put up the sheet right here, please? This is the overall budget that shows the revenues and expenditures for each category and the totals.
And I don't know if she made it clear enough, but we just got in today our workers' comp proposal, and it was about
$24,800
more than last year. And so because of that, we're going to have to dip into the reserves by another 24.8, which brings us up to the $296,000 out of the reserve fund. My question to you, and this is public comment, and we have a pretty good number of residents here this evening, is if we stay at 5.35 on the millage rate, we would have to go into the reserve $296,000. If we were to raise the millage rate to 5.4, we'd have to go in, we would reduce that to $244,000. Hearing what we've talked about tonight as far as the tree issue and the bicycle issue, and we've got another presentation coming later about historic trees and whatnot, what is your feeling on an increase in the millage rate from 5.35 to 5.4?
Dawn, before you take any comments from the public, you need to announce on B on your agenda.
Okay, that was what I was really talking about was the town of Ocean Ridge computed the mileage rate is higher than the rollback rate, which is 5.0904 by 5.10%. The millage rate levied is 5.35. So that's where we are now.
Right.
And does everyone understand the rollback rate, where that comes from? Okay, Tracy, would you like to explain
right,
that?
yes, I will. The rolled back rate is the rate that we would use if your taxes didn't increase at all. Okay, so we had a valuation increase this year. So if we were using that, the rolled back rate of 5.0904 would give the town the same amount of money as we received this year. Now, when you're talking about flat millage, we are at 5.35 right now. The commission was proposing to stay at 5.35, but you would still see a slight increase in your taxes at that rate due to the rolled back, because your valuations on your property may have increased.
Can you give some examples? Remember, we talked about this percentage-wise per $1,000 property value, how much the rise would be, so people have an idea what we're talking about when you say increase?
For,
Do you have that?
you have this sheet right here? So if you have a $500,000 property,
There you
because your valuation increase went up possibly by around 6%, your taxes if we stay at the flat 5.35 rate, your taxes on that property would go up around $160. If you have $1 million home, your taxes could go up by about $300 if we stay at the millage of 5.35.
And that's everything on average.
Right.
Right.
And then you got a 1.5.
Now, understanding that not everybody's valuations increased by the 6%, it varies by property. And that's assessed by the property appraiser.
We're going to have public comment?
Would love to have you, Terry.
Terry Brown, Harbor Drive South. I support increasing the rate to 5.4. Now, it's easy for me to say that. We've been here since 1991, and 94 we got the Save Our Homes Amendment. So it's not gonna, I'm not gonna miss that money. But there's no other way to do it. I'm not gonna give up those benefits under Homestead. But we need to do some of these infrastructure things that we've been talking about. And I think that the people who do pay the higher rate are going to appreciate why we need to do it. And we were talking about beach crossovers that we talked about for years. They haven't done anything with Anna Street. It's strip clean. It needs a handrail going up. I see old people there trying to get up there. The Beachway doesn't have a handrail. Maura Walker and Julia Walker were trying to use it. They were here on the funeral, for a funeral, and they were trying to walk up there, and he was holding on to her like I hold on to Lucy when we go up steps. So that needs a handrail. The Beachway, I mean the Porter Street deck needs some decking replaced. It needs joists replaced. It needs overall structurally increased, or we're going to lose it in a big storm. So, and the bridges that they were talking about need to be fixed and improved. So, in the landscaping that we're talking about, all of these small things that add up. Now, all of a sudden, you have an emergency, and you have a big priority, and each commissioner has their own parochial little ideas about where they should spend money in the town. Well, it needs to be more equal, and the people that are on the bottom of the list, like the beach crossovers, need to have more attention this year. That was a commitment that was made earlier this year. So I support the increase. I think you need to fix it there this year and ride it out and see how many rebels you have in the town. Thanks.
Charles?
Go ahead. I got it real quick. Tom Perry, Harbor Drive South. I do agree with Mr. Brown. I do support the increase in millage. I think it's minimal charge compared to the infrastructure and the light, small infrastructure that we do need to have in the community. Would that dip into the reserve that we have? Or would that be?
We'd still have to dip into the reserves, but we would take less from the reserves than we would normally. Charles?
Charles Kittler, 35 Hersey Drive. With all due respect,
Several items were brought out about bike safety. Well, those are outside sources that are coming in here causing problems, so we shouldn't have to pay for that. Those people, and I encourage the chief to do more about the cyclists, because I've had some run-ins with them, and it's the crowd mentality that they have. So, but I can't see raising our taxes because of that. Also, when it comes to trimming trees, if two neighbors can't get together and solve a situation with a problem, why does the town have to spend money? You know, people, let's trim these trees back, take care of your neighbors, and let's not force it on the town so we can all just sit here and raise and raise and raise our taxes. Enough said on that. We don't know what big storm is coming, but a lot of these beach crossovers, and I fish the ocean about every other day, are in bad shape. But what we've done at Beachway is the correct way to do it, because it can't get swept away in the next storm because it's no longer there, it's gone. And I'll lose mine and several other people will lose theirs, but we pay to have it back personally. But the public ones are not done to the state standards that they want now. And those pilings are polluting the groundwater. They should be taken out if you want to talk ecology. My next point, let's prioritize things that we want to do. We have to live within a budget. If we can't do it this year, we'll do it next year. But you start 1 to 12. If we can only get 6 done, that's what we do this year. We do the other 6. They come up and they go to 1 to 6 the next year. But let's not raise and raise and raise and raise. Sure, we need a reserve, but we have to prioritize. You got to live within that budget. Everyone does. So enough said. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie.
I
Martin,
want to make a comment on that.
what you got?
Tree costs.
Martin?
Good afternoon. Martin Wiescherleck, 5 Engel Drive. While I'm a liberal at heart, I'm a fiscal conservative when it comes to money. And my thoughts on this are as follows. We live in a community that is very special, and we live in a town that is it is bigger and better than most other towns around us. We have mostly $1 million homes, and I think that an increase of $300 or $500 on the annual taxes is not going to make a huge difference to most of our residents, and it shouldn't. I would not take the 5.4 into consideration. I would go with a 5.55. I would go with the highest one that you can throw out there, and here's the reason why. The commission and the previous commissions have over the years managed successfully to put money aside more than most other communities and more than what is suggested. We have a very, very good reserve that we might need. And if anything was a wake-up call, last week should have been that wake-up call when we had a Category 5 sitting 100 miles off our shores. And just by the grace of it, that thing turned and went away from us. If that thing would have come to us, those 60% of our annual budget that we have in reserve would have been wiped out with the rest of this town. I think we should hold on to everything that we have and not dip into that pond. Try to keep it as much as you can. Go with the maximum rate and save this town that money for when you need it. It's always good to have it in your pocket. I'm sure we can afford the extra $500. It's this year. Next year, if our budget looks better because we have less projects, and I know there have been a lot of projects this year that were unforeseen, fantastic. Next year we can bring it down to 5.35, we can bring it down to whatever it is. But this year, try to stay with whatever we need. Don't dip into reserves. Reserves are there for a reason. Keep them there for a reason. This is not the time to play for a couple of $100. on somebody's tax bill.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Christine?
I must agree that I'm Christine Schulte, 7 Adams Road. I just got back in town today after a hiatus of about 9 days out of state. From what I've seen, we were extremely lucky. This system was so big, it was bigger than the state of Florida. If it had come over the state of Florida, we may have ended up like the Bahamas. Of course, some of our structures are, much stronger than over there, and we have more protection than those islands have. So that's a scary feeling. And as we all know, or should know, we are in the height of a hurricane season. 1 week into September, October, we still have 7 weeks. And as we speak today, we have 4 systems out there coming from Africa. One will do nothing. We still have 3 more that we have to watch. And obviously, this should be the #1 priority of the town. There are always projects to be done. And I agree with the 2 gentlemen. We have to prioritize, what we can do within our budget. And I'm not too sure that the majority of the residents here will be very happy about hiking up the millage rate to the top rate. Some of us can afford it, some of us cannot. We can hardly deduct anything these days because of the law that was passed a year ago. I'd like to have an opinion from maybe Commissioner Bessler if what his comments are. I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, but what is the best situation for all of us about the millage rate that is, how can I say, not the top, not the lowest, to achieve certain things. But priority #1 is the hurricane business, right? And everything else has to wait if we can afford it.
So,
Anyway.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not going to, I was about ready to put Commissioner Bessler on the spot, so you can take credit for it, or I'll take credit for it.
Well, do you want to wait till all the public
Wait until
comments?
public
Do you have
comments
any more?
closed, yeah.
Okay, hearing no more?
Okay, I guess I'm on the spot, right?
Okay.
The one problem of raising taxes is it's very difficult to come back down. And what happens is, I think you might not have been at the last meeting, but the last time when we raised, I shouldn't say we raised taxes, but all of a sudden, we got the Briny Breezes money, and then we started spending it again. And not that I'm saying we're wasting it, I mean, we're spending it on the right things, but we're spending it. And I think what's gonna happen is, if we raise taxes, we're gonna find ways to spend that money. Now, the issue was, when originally we talked about raising the taxes, we had a 500,000. We were going after 500,000 in reserve. And, well, the last meeting, it was whatever it was, 270, I guess, because it's now up another 271, so it's up another 24,000. So now it's at 296. What happens is, every year, we usually have a surplus. Because what happened, you want to be conservative, right? You want to show your expenses higher than they should be and the revenue. So we plug this reserve number of taking the reserves, but we rarely take it. So right now, I think, based on what we could spend and what we're going to get revenue, is that reserve number might be 100 grand that we have to take. But my opinion is we wait and see, because it's not going to be a lot of money. I mean, 100,000 is $100,000. But once we raise taxes, I don't think we're going to see it come back down again. So being fiscally responsible, I think we should keep it at the 5.35, because if we go up to 5.4, you're only talking about another $50,000, and is that going to make a big difference? What happened this year, well, I shouldn't say, it really was this problem really took place last year. And, well, I'm sorry, it's this year, this current year. Our budget is our problem from our current year. And what happened in our current year? We had the police contract come up. And because of that, we came back to market value. Well, we were a lot lower. So we saw a big jump in the salary increases for all the policemen, which then rolled into, everybody else, because you have to keep everybody else in par. Then the last wave was the dispatchers. So now everybody's taken care of, basically on market wages. Then, of course, you know what happened with the hydrants. Nobody was watching I shouldn't say nobody, but the people in charge of watching those hydrants weren't watching the hydrants. And we had extra expenses on that. So I think next year, when we increase the taxes and the values of the properties automatically go up another 5%, we should be okay, and we'll be back in always adding into the reserves. And I can't predict everything. We could find something else that wasn't looked after, but right now, my opinion is we stay at the 5.35. We live with this year. The reserves, maybe it'll come out at $100,000, but the following year, we'll be back putting the money in. That's my opinion.
Tracy,
Thank
what
you,
is our
Commissioner.
reserve amount?
Any other commissioner comments?
Yes, thank you. Tracy, what is our reserve amount?
$4,800,000.
And I echo both sides. Historically, we haven't usually done a reduction, but we did 2 years ago, 535 to 525. I think it was very politically motivated, but we have historically done things like that. This year, we are not putting any excess back into reserves, and we have tightened from a 97% budget to a 98.5% budget. So going forward, we will not have those chunks of change to put back into the reserves. So salary increases, which we brought up, will continue. That's sustainable now. So that's something that's not going to go back down. I guess my question is, and it's hard to predict, is what does $4.8 million get you if Dorian had hit us? Does that get us a new town hall? Does it get us a whole new fleet? What?
Town hall won't blow away. What an insult.
I'm sorry, it's not an insult, number one. And number two, this is my time to talk, okay?
Well, you're saying wrong things.
Hang on, Digby, please.
So when you're looking at $4.8 million, I don't know, and I don't think any of us know what is the percentage of that could be used or would be used in a major hurricane. So I would not be opposed to doing a slight increase. 50,000 is 50,000. I mean, I just don't think we're going to have the monies left over with all the projects that we've got to return things back to reserves like we historically have, so.
Could I ask you a question? Because you had said that we're not going to have any reserves this year. Maybe I would.
Return to reserves.
Right, so when you say this year, are you talking about the budget year or this current year?
This current year.
Okay. Maybe I wasn't at a meeting or, because I know you had that special meeting. Is that true?
We don't know the answer yet.
Oh, okay.
We just had a hurricane and everything, so it's not looking great, but we're not sure yet.
Okay. That's
We'll
fine.
know more in a couple of weeks, but
And part of that is
it'll be
due,
smaller.
like you said, to the hydrants, so, which was unexpected, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I get, you want a great town, you're gonna have to pay for it. And I get that, and we are in a very fragile ecosystem here, where a storm could definitely wipe you out. We are healthy reserves. Not being able to put something back in, which we don't know yet, obviously, but not being able to constantly refill that cushion every year is a concern. So, like Don, I wanna hear what everybody else has to think about that, because y'all, just like us, are gonna be paying for that out of your pocket. I don't think, I can't speak for everybody, but I don't think $300 is that much over the whole year if we needed to raise it, if we came to that consensus. Because didn't we talked about originally the highest we would go would be 5.55, And we were able, thank you Tracy, to squeeze that budget nicely so that we stayed at our same millage rate. But we were prepared if we needed to, we have, which we do now, we have that little ability to move up if we need to. And we do have a lot of projects, but there's no reason to think we're not going to keep having a lot of projects. It's just upkeep, maintenance and upkeep. So, you know, y'all think out of your pocket. I don't think that's a terrible thing. I don't want to say no new taxes because that's how we survive. But we won't know if we have any more cushion, because if we keep adding back into our reserves, that's a nice plus. If we get a Category 5 across us, I don't think there's any such thing as enough reserve to help us. So that's something we can't really worry about.
We always have to remember too, though, we do have insurance.
Right, exactly. That's what I mean.
So-
That's something we really can't worry about.
Right.
But all the things that go with it.
Our reserves are gonna help us
Exactly,
stay
because
afloat
they're
until
very
we
healthy.
can receive our insurance monies and FEMA monies and everything else.
Right.
And isn't that typically 2 years out?
Well, FEMA is, not insurance. I mean, insurance
good.
would
Right,
help
they
us
have to-
immediately.
Okay, understand that I brought this up so that we could have this conversation and the residents could participate in it. Not particularly because I recommend myself bringing the taxes up to 5.4, but I wanted to use that for a beginning of the discussion, and I really appreciate the comments that we got from the residents in attendance here today. So Tracy, what do we do now? So do we have a
The next-
resolution to
right.
take it to 5.35. If there was a change in that, we would have to redo the resolution, correct?
You just have to amend the resolution as, so it
okay.
would be approving it as amended.
Okay. So hearing that, then I would like to get a motion from a commissioner or commissioners on leaving the millage rate at 5.35 or raising it to a number we've discussed anywhere from 5.4 to 5.5. So
Carla, do you want to put that village chart up again?
do I hear?
If we make the resolution for 5.35, then, and we're still working on this budget. It's like the ongoing thing that doesn't go away. So we're still working on the budget. If we see that we have, say, a little bit that does get to go back into reserves that makes us feel a little more comfortable, then all we would need we wouldn't touch it. If we needed some, we could amend it before the final.
No,
No,
if if you're going to amend it, my suggestion is that you raise it now, you can always lower it on the final.
Right, because
You can
what
do
you
that.
set now, you
Right.
can't go above.
Okay.
This is your
Unless you
tentative budget.
send out notices to every resident, and there's a process that you've got to follow that you may not want to do. Now, I guess whoever makes the motion will need to take a little bit of time, because Tracy, right after we see what that rate is, you will need to announce what it exceeds the rollback rate by, because if it changes from 5.35.
It doesn't change it anyway, Brian.
Well, no, I mean, if the 5.35 goes to, say, 5.4, if that's the motion, then we would need to announce what the rollback rate, what it is exceeding the rollback rate by. It's still not that 5.1%, it would be something else.
Correct.
Okay, so we'll need to announce that. So whoever makes a motion, if it's something different than that, I guess after there's a motion and a second, just give,
We'd have to recess.
yeah,
so that I can go through the
give Tracy a little bit of time, because she's going to have to announce what the increase again, above the rollback rate would be. So we need to do that before you vote on that. So, but anyway, so I just want to announce that, so.
Do I have a motion from the commissioner on setting the millage rate?
Well, I'll make the motion to leave it at the 5.35.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second.
And that's adopting Resolution 2019-13. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments? Hearing none. I'll entertain, we'll take a vote. All in favor of leaving the millage rate at 5.35, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 3-1. Thank you very much, and thank you all for participating in this lively discussion. Carla, would you please read the motion number, the resolution 2019-13 by title, please?
Or 14?
14.
Resolution of the Town Commission of the Town of Ocean Ridge of Palm Beach County, Florida, adopting the tentative levying of ad valorem taxes for fiscal year 2019-2020, providing for an effective date.
That was 13, right? We're on 14 now.
Resolution of the Town of Ocean Ridge of Palm Beach County, Florida, adopting the tentative budget for fiscal year 2019-2020, providing for an effective date.
Okay, well, do I hear a motion to entertain and adopt resolution number 2019-14?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second.
I'll second it.
And a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 3-1. Okay, we move, thank you very much. We move on to the consent agenda. Carla, would you?
Nope.
what-
Announce the final hearing first.
F.
What are you talking about? Oh, the
1F.
second, oh, I'm
F.
sorry, yes. The second and final hearing on the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget will be held at 5 PM on Monday, September 23rd, 2019. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Carla, would you please read the consent agenda into the record?
Adopt minutes of regular Town Commission meeting of August 5th, 2019. Adopt minutes of special Town Commission meeting of August 5th, 2019. Adopt CRS floodplain management plan and annual progress report. Approve annual employee benefit insurance renewals. Authorize mayor and town manager to sign engagement letter with Nolan, Holt, and Minor to perform the FY19 annual audit services. Approve interlocal agreement with Palm Beach County for Direct Connect Radio. Extend a hybrid contract for 1 year for inspection services. Approve agreement to provide police services to town of Briny Breezes. And approve emergency expenditure for mobile generator use during Hurricane Dorian.
Thank you, Carla. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
So moved.
Second.
And I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Regular agenda items. Agenda item number 3, the second reading of the comprehensive plan. Carla, would you please read that for us?
Second reading and adaptation of ordinance number 2019-09, an ordinance of the Town of Ocean Ridge, Florida, amending the comprehensive plan of the Town of Ocean Ridge, which amendment is more fully described in Exhibit A, attached hereto, in accordance with the Local Government Comprehensive Planning and Land Development Regulation Act, as amended, being Section 163.3161 at SEC, Florida statutes, providing for the amendment of the town's future land use element, coastal management element, conservation element, and recreation and open space element pursuant to comprehensive land use amendment laws of the state of Florida, for the purpose of implementing regulations regarding environmentally sensitive land, sea level rise, and creation and park space, providing for all the repeal of all ordinances in conflict, providing for severability, providing for directions to town clerk, providing for an effective date, and providing for other purposes.
Thank you, Carla. We have Marty Minor here this evening with Urban Design. Would you?
Good evening.
For the record, my name is Marty Miner with Urban Design Kildare Studios. This is the second reading for the changes in the comprehensive plan. This is the final stop in the journey we have been taking over the past year. Before we get into it, I wanted to thank you for your time. This is not necessarily an easy topic. It's not necessarily the most exciting of topics, but it does play a part in the future of your town. And I thank you for your time and your efforts in part of that. I would also like to commend staff, has done a wonderful job. They are a pleasure to work with and one of the most professional staffs I've been associated with. So it's always a pleasure to be here. With that, as you remember, back in June, we adopted this on the first reading, these changes that to the comprehensive plan. We sent that off to the state, the Economic Opportunity, Environmental Protection, Department of State, Department of Transportation. Then also the South Florida Regional, South Florida Water Management District, Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, Palm Beach County, all the local municipalities, they all take a look at this. We received one comment from the State Department of Economic Opportunity, the former DCA, if you're an old planner like I am. They asked that we amend this, a policy within the coastal management area to say that the town's drainage requirements will be consistent with the Florida Building Code and Florida statutes. We looked at that, the town attorney and I, we agree with that change. I'm proposing that in there. I've had some preliminary discussions with the Department of EO, and initially they said, this looks good, you adopted it, we're happy with that. Haven't got a formal sign off because we had a storm last week. The other policy that has changed from the first reading is within the future land use element, and this was a suggestion made by the Department of Transportation. This is a new policy. If someone's coming in with a plan development, a new subdivision, some sort of compiling of lots and then changing it, and you create a new street. The policy is the new street has to be designed incorporating the latest information regarding sea level rise and provide that information as part of that application process. So I thought that was an excellent suggestion, and so I added that on there. The comments from all the reviewing agencies that we received is in your packet. This is for second reading. I'm recommending you approve this, and if you have any questions.
Pretty clear.
Yeah.
Thank you for your hard work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Any comments from residents? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2019-09.
So moved. I'll second.
And I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Okay.
Thank you, Marty.
Moving right along here. We have, am I at agenda item number 5? That's where we are? Okay. Town manager contract. Brian, you want to bring us up to speed on this item, please?
Sure. At your last commission meeting, you gave direction to negotiate a contract with Tracy Stevens, who would be the town manager. And I've just, in the memo to you, I had highlighted just a couple of the terms in here to point out. A lot of the other stuff is just standard. I don't want to say it's all standard boilerplate for most town manager contracts, but it is. Just to go over a couple of the highlights here, the salary is at $102,500. Contract will commence on 10/1/19 for an indefinite term, which means that it'll continue unless one of the parties decides to terminate. We can terminate with or without cause. If we terminate without cause, then we will provide Tracy with 20 weeks of her base salary as severance pay for that. If we terminate with cause, there will be no severance. Also, on the flip side of that, if Tracy decides to terminate the agreement, she must give the town 60 days written notice prior to such termination. Effective October 1, 2019, she will accrue vacation days at the rate of annual rate of 17 days. And then a fuel allowance, which was also in your budget, it's in the town manager's budget line item, was set out or was provided for, or it's explained in the contract that she would be allowed to make use of that annual fuel budget not to exceed $3,600 if she so desires. So those are the main highlights of the contract. I don't know if you all have any questions for me or not.
Are there any comments from the residents regarding Tracy's contract? Okay, Commissioner? Collins?
Actually, I do have one, and you're going to think I'm crazy because I said let's not raise taxes. But I've been going over all this with the budget for all this time, and I'm looking at 1, 2, 3 different versions of our budget, and our most recent version, put your fingers in your ears here, our most recent version here, we've brought Tracy down from where we first started talking about salary. Now, I have to say out loud that I think she does above and beyond the job. We talk about salary surveys, which I'm looking at here, and when we talked about the salary surveys, we were mentioning who was below the average, and in there was town manager. And I'm looking at the surveys, average 122, I'm looking at minimum salary range 125. I'm thinking that, and I'm just throwing it out there for discussion here, I'm thinking that she's worth a little bit more to us because, well, her background, what she's done for us, and we've had that conversation. If you want the best people, you need to pay for them. So I know we've already been through the budget a couple times, but we've done this.
Well, what, if you will remember, what we did is we also, I think it started out at 100.
112, I think, right?
We started at 100, and then we brought it to 102.5, which is where I think we started with Jamie. And then we also have, excuse me, we also have an item in there where she will be reevaluated in January.
And that's my backup option here is
Yes.
but I just wanted, while we're doing this, I pulled all this stuff out looking at this, budgeted 112, and then we went back to 102,
Yeah, and
I
I think
think.
it's at the budget for, it's 106, we were looking at it, the tentative 5%
2020.
increase in January,
Right.
which would put her in for 106
Right.
for the budget, although she wouldn't earn the 106 until after January.
I know, but I just wanted to put that out while we're discussing it, although I know we're practically got it all signed, sealed, and delivered. But I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the contract and appoint Tracy as town manager as discussed and read.
You want the motion?
I'd like a
All right.
motion.
I move to appoint Tracy Stevens as town manager and ratify the town manager contract as submitted.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have 2 seconds. Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay?
Nay.
We got a nay.
No, I said no nay.
No nay.
Nay, nay.
Okay, it passed unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. Congratulations, Tracy.
Thank you.
Well deserved, I may say. And which brings us to the town manager's report.
Yes. I just wanted to let the public know that at our next septic to sewer meeting, the town engineer will be presenting her septic to sewer report. That meeting is on September 18th, and we urge the public to attend. While testing our pump stations in preparation for Hurricane Dorian, we found an inoperable generator unit at our tropical pump station, which is one of our main pump stations for the south end. We secured a backup generator at that station during the storm, and we also stationed our Big Blue mobile unit in that area as an extra precautionary measure, because as the commission knows, we had some flooding problems in that area in the past, and when I say flooding, I don't mean nuisance flooding, I mean flooding to homes. So we took that extra precautionary measure. The pump station has now been fixed, and we're back up and running. I want to commend our police department and our public works personnel for their continued dedication to the town. They all work very, very well together to protect the town during the storm events. Staff continues to work on code amendments related to building near the coastal construction control line, as well as our shed regulations. These items will be discussed at a future Planning and Zoning Commission meeting and will be forthcoming to the Town Commission in the coming months. The paving project on A1A near Ocean Avenue due to the water main break has been completed and invoiced. And my last item is staff has recently met with Representative Caruso to discuss state grant funding and legislative appropriation opportunities. We will also discuss some septic to sewer grant opportunities with him in the future. And we also discussed the impacts of potential future building near our sensitive mangrove areas along the lagoon.
Thank you, Tracy.
I have a question, Tracy.
Yes.
This generator unit, I was shocked to find out that it was $10,000 to rent it for 1 week.
Yes.
Are we gonna get reimbursed for that?
We're putting it in to FEMA for submission as part of our grant funding for Hurricane Dorian. So yes.
Okay, moving along to the town attorney's report.
No report.
No report, okay. Chief, I'm sure you have a report, please.
Attached is the July monthly police and fire report. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Hearing none, it's my turn.
Oh, you moved really quick on that.
I need to, yes, I did. I have more important things to discuss right now.
Okay.
Everybody needs to understand that we've heard a lot of praise for the staff. And I wish to echo that upon the town and thank my staff and the public works staff for making it possible for us to do our hurricane duties. It is not an easy task to put 25 people in this room to sleep for 48 hours and eat and live and still maintain your level of composure. It's a very difficult task. They did extremely well. They always do. That's not possible without the residents and your support. So you folks need to be commended also, and the residents need to be commended because you made our jobs much easier by allowing us to prepare early and by understanding when we encountered you at the bridge and we didn't give you the answer that you wanted right away, that we were trying to do it in the best interest of the town, and having the residents give us that understanding makes it much, much easier for us to do our job and to do what we're supposed to do. So I commend all of you. Please sign up for Civic Ready. I cannot urge you and the residents enough to do that. We were signing people up during the storm. We had people come in here that we helped sign up. The amount of information that went out, though it may not have seemed like a lot, okay, your town manager put a great amount of effort on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then came here for 48 hours and spent 2 days with me, and made sure that everybody got the information that was necessary without drama and in very clear fashion, I have to tell you. I've heard some negative feedback on other areas of the county and cities that did not do that. I think that the program paid for itself in one storm.
Yep.
On another note, I'm proud to say that the town's police department undergoes an FBI and criminal justice information systems audit every 3 years. It's about 50 pages of questions on our information technology system to make sure that we're secure and that we're following all the rules that the FBI has for us and that the FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, has for us. And it's coordinated by Lieutenant Jones and Dispatch Manager, Records Manager Simpson. I just got a report today. We passed with 100%.
Great.
Congratulations.
Well done.
That concludes my report.
Thank you, Chief. Wayne Cannon?
That's a hard act to follow. In front of you, you've got my report. Building permits continue to increase. And again, I want to thank the residents for their cooperation during the storm. Nobody decided to cut additional vegetation and obstruct drainage that would have required personnel to be spending the time doing that versus doing storm preparation. So thank you for everybody concerned. The contractors were compliant in tidying up their construction sites, preventing missiles. So on the whole, everybody pulled together and did what we had to do. So thanks again to everybody's support, and again, thanks to the commission for their continued support.
Thank you, Wayne.
Wayne, can I ask a
Sure.
question? How's the coconut issue going? I know it was, August 15th they had to have them all done, or do you guys go around and make sure all the coconuts are down? Because I still see a lot of coconuts there, and hear some more storms are coming, so.
I'll let Chief answer,
Oh,
since
sorry.
he's code enforcement.
Oh, sorry, wrong guy.
The commission enacted that ordinance a little late into the season and set a date of August the 15th. On August the 16th, we began a door-to-door campaign at the request of and suggestion of one of your fellow commissioners. We developed some door hangers to try and be as genteel and nice as we could, and getting the information out since a lot of our residents were already coming for the season. So we placed door hangers and attempted to make personal contact. There are 83 residences that I have listed that we know have not complied. We're still working on that. You've asked that we not do a strict enforcement of it in this hurricane season. So we're trying to prod people gently into compliance. Yes, there are a considerable amount of coconuts still hanging from trees. It is an educational process. It will take some time.
Okay, thank you.
I want to go back to the building inspector's section, and I don't know if you all are familiar with this or you've had this information in front of you, but and this is July's numbers, but they received, and you have to understand how big Ocean Ridge is. It's not very big. We got in 85 applications received, permit applications. They issued 92 of them, and the inspections performed by the building department were 207 for the month of July. So for a small town, we're pretty busy. And I looked at Wayne's vehicle that he uses and the budget that we had for the gas for that, and I calculated it out. I think you just about used it all up in July, so for next year. Okay, the next item is commissioners' comments, and it starts off with me. And if most of you remember, in November of last year, the commission rejected on a 3-2 vote submitting a referendum to the charter ordinance that would have required a supermajority vote of 4 commissioners to adopt any ordinance or resolution that increased the maximum allowable density, building height, or floor area ratio of future development within Ocean Ridge. Next year, we are in the process of looking at the potable water contract with Boynton, and as part of that, Boynton has proposed that we consider using them in septic to sewer conversion, which we talked about earlier with Nancy Hogan. We've had one septic to sewer board meeting, which is 5 residents, and it's a great committee. Very well appointed, very knowledgeable, and with Neil Henninger as the chair, The last meeting we left, he assigned each of the board members responsibilities to work on and come back to the meeting that's going to be held on the 18th. Plus, we have another proposal coming in, another presentation coming in on the 18th. In talking to the residents, the issue that I'm hearing over and over again has to do with the sewer to septic, or the septic to sewer conversion, and what that could possibly do to our town as it is now. The fear is that if we have a sewer system set up that can handle any amount of volume and being pumped off the island, that existing condos and townhomes and whatnot that we have could be remodeled and be increased if the height area were raised by a commission vote of 3-2. Also, the other area is the FAR. If the FAR is increased, then you can have a larger building on the same size lot. That's a concern. And then the last one is the density of the building that is on the lot. So that's what I'm hearing. So with that, those comments and the fact that we are now looking at going to a septic or to sewer mandate possibly, or this is going to take some time and it's going to take some money. But I think what we need to do is we need to bring this resolution for referendum back as a first reading on next month, on October. So if we bring it back as a first reading on October, then in November we can have the second reading, and if it approves first and second reading, then we can put it on a referendum on the ballot in March. So that's my recommendation at this point in time. I'd like to get a consensus from the other commissioners to move forward with this. And I'll turn it over for comments to the commissioners.
Well, I've heard from some residents about this, and I have all my paperwork here, and I definitely get the whole idea. Density, building height, floor area ratio, those are big changes, and if they're moved, tweaked, what have you, by the way the commission can go, that could make a big difference for our town. I totally get that. And by the referendum, basically it's saying we put it out there on the ballot for the residents to take a vote on. But what I'm concerned about is the wording, because once you put it out there, getting it back is a bit of a nightmare, and it doesn't work out the way you want to, so to speak. So legally, Brian, you see where, what the essence of the concept here is to try to keep something as important as density, building height, and ratio have to have a supermajority. I get that, it makes sense. But what are the ups and downs of putting this as part of the charter? That's a big deal.
You know, I mean, the language like this is in other charters. It's not, I don't want to say it's uncommon. You know, I could probably know just as many charters that have a supermajority vote as ones that don't. The only thing that you all would have to keep in mind is once it's in the charter, if we realize that there's some unintended consequences, and I'm not quite sure what they would be because I've tried to think of them. If there are any unintended consequences, it's not like we can just go, oh, let's go back and change it by doing another ordinance draft. It's kind of like, no, we would have to go back to referendum. Now, we did, in noticing that this was coming up with Tracy's approval there, we sent it to Corey O'Gorman, you know, our town planner, who kind of looks at projects and things like that, not only here in Ocean Ridge, but in other places, and who has many, many years of planning experience. And we actually met with him today to see if he had any comments or other changes or possible, you know, issues or something. And he didn't really. He goes, no, that's, you know, the language is kind of standard language that you see in other charters as well. It's just, my only comment would be just make sure that if you do approve this, you know, it's in there, and if a commissioner is, let's say, if they have a voting conflict, then there's only 4 of you, and if somebody's absent, well, you wouldn't be able to pass this. You wouldn't be able to pass whatever would be, you know, the ordinance that would be coming in front of you, because there's not going to be 4 of you here. So that's the only thing, that's my only concern about sometimes when you require supermajority votes is you need, it's just the process. It's not really about the material, because to be honest with you, I don't live here, and you all know what's best for your community, so I'm just looking at the process that you would need to go through. And that's really kind of my comments on that, is just, you know, be aware of that when you have something in place like that, you know, if somebody's absent or somebody's conflicted out.
Somebody recuses themselves, we're back to a regular majority.
Well, no, I mean, by having language in here like this, you would have to have 4. So if, let's say that there's some point that for whatever reason, you only have 4 people on the commission, somebody has to declare a conflict, you would have to wait till you get that 4th person or something like that before you adopt anything. So that's very rare, I understand, but I just want to make sure that I point that out.
I was part of the 2 that voted to put it on a referendum, so I'm in full support of bringing it back, not to muddy the waters, but I think one of the issues that if we wanted to really take this one step further is these are large enough issues that beyond a supermajority at the commission level, I think that these are issues that individually potentially might be worthy of a referendum by the whole town, period, overall. So if the supermajority said we want to increase building height, then we would then take it to the referendum of the populace, of all the residents, to say whether that they would agree with that or not. So I think tightening it to a supermajority gets us 3/4 of the way there, but there are some things that are so important to the character and the sustainability and the essence of our town that I'd like to potentially see it go one step further and allow the residents to vote upon something like that too. But for right now, this is a good step in the right direction.
Commissioner.
All right. Basically, I agree with everything you want to accomplish here, but I'm just afraid you're not going to accomplish what you want to accomplish. The 3 issues I have is when you have a supermajority, that means the minority could rule the town on these issues, meaning that all you needed was 2 votes against it, and it's not going to move, because there's going to be some times you may want to adjust for this. The second, and it's basically Brian hinted at it, and I had the same problem. I talked to a bunch of lawyers on this issue, and they all said the same thing. It's very dangerous to have a supermajority, but I can't give you an example of where it's going to bite you. And that's the problem. You don't know what's going to happen, and that's the problem with this whole thing, that the minority will rule, and the reason you don't want them to rule at a certain point in time, nobody can give you an example. The third issue I have with this is when the committee was put together, there were 5 people. When they voted on this, there were only 3 people in the room. One of them that wasn't in the room is a lawyer, so I would think he might be able to have some say on the matter, but he wasn't there, because when the meeting was called, 2 people couldn't make it. Actually, the 2 former mayors, Pugh and Khalil, sorry. So my suggestion is, if you really want to put this back on the table, you have those 5 people meet again and discuss it. Because one of the rumors I heard was it was really a 2-to-1 vote, and one of the persons changed just because they knew they were gonna lose at 2-to-1, so they just threw it on. Now, that was a rumor, so I don't know if that's true, so, take that with a grain of salt. But I know for a fact, it only went 3-0. So we put a committee of 5 together, and only 3 voted on it. So I think if you really want to bring this back, because I know the people want it, but to be honest with you, you should just talk to a lawyer. Talk to a lawyer that has some kind of dealings in this area and ask them what their opinion is. We all know people that you can ask, so you might change your mind, you might not. But I understand the residents will probably vote this through, but I'm not sure if that's the right thing to do.
Well, if they talk to their lawyer and whatnot, then they would have, if we've made it a referendum, they would have they would have the knowledge at that point in time to vote either for or against it in the March election.
The individual voters, when you said talk to your,
Right, but do you think they will? I mean, do you think the community's gonna do it? How many people we have here out of 1,000 voters?
We do have an
2,000
attorney here that we pay handsomely.
Right, but did he answer really the question? I mean, he hemmed and hawed and, it's like anywhere. They don't give you the answer. You got to take the camera off them and then ask those questions, and that's what you're able to do when you talk to, lawyers you know.
you said basically the same thing that the person you spoke to said, is that there's something in there that could possibly come back around and be a problem, but you can't put your finger on what it might be, right? So-
Correct, they
My
all said
concern
that.
is the unintended consequences, that it's unintended because I don't know. And to change it, you would have to have another referendum.
Right.
But like I say, that's up to you all, and I've spoken to you all individually with the same conversation, so.
But I mean, but to my other point is, don't you think the committee of 5 people that were supposed to recommend it to us should have voted on it and not just the 3?
Well, they did recommend to the commission that we put this on as a referendum.
3 people.
You're saying
2
not the
were
whole
missing
committee.
from the
Right.
meeting.
It came
Not the
from
whole
the
committee.
committee as a recommendation.
Right, because there was only 3 people at the committee, so 3 people, it wasn't 5.
Wasn't a
They didn't
supermajority.
vote on it, really. Well, they had 3 people that voted on it, and somehow they got the 3. Whether it was a 2-to-1, which I said, that was a rumor I heard.
Yeah.
But if it was 2-to-1, say that it's true, then the other 2 could have voted against it, and they wouldn't have brought it to us. And one of them's a lawyer, so that's what I'm saying, if we think
Therein lies
lawyer.
the problem.
Well, maybe, you're right, because they won't give you an answer. A definite answer, I guess. So my point is, if you want my vote, I mean, you might not need it, but if you want my vote, I say it goes back to the 5 committee members, they make that decision, and then we
Well,
hear
if it
what
went-
they have to say.
If it went back to the 5 committee members, then we would not, it would not be ready for a first reading in October. Probably would not be ready for the first reading of October, and then we would miss the November deadline in order to get it on the ballot in March.
Weren't we saying that there might be a way to stretch that out when we were discussing it?
No.
Well, I thought that the
No.
deadline
The
was
deadline's
December
December
something.
13th.
So you have a first reading in November, second reading in December, but that is cutting it very,
November,
very
December.
close.
Well, what are we afraid of now? We're afraid of sewer. Do you think we're gonna have sewer within the next year? Right? I mean, that's why are we bringing this up because of sewer, or because you just want a second bite of the apple because we've got a new, commission? Do you want?
The sewer is the primary reason, yes, because as the septic to sewer committee moves forward, if they had the knowledge that this was going back on as a referendum, it may change some of the discussions and the decisions that are made within that committee. As far as moving forward with it, that they know that we're gonna have a referendum that the people in the town could vote on and say, even if we put in the sewers, we know that it's gonna take a majority vote by the commission in order to increase density, for.
Supermajority.
building.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
That's the primary thing, is to try and give them some more latitude in their discussions by taking that one issue off, that concern that they're gonna have in the back of their minds. Well, if I move forward and agree that we go to put in a septic system, we might have a commission that would, on a 3-2 vote, pass an ordinance to increase the FAR, and that, in effect, is gonna change the ambiance of the town.
Because the sewer system would make it more
You have the
amenable,
capacity.
right,
You
more
have the
amenable to
capacity.
build bigger, higher, denser, right? Is that basically where,
Yes.
On those three issues.
right?
Any one of those three
Right.
issues.
So town manager, how do we proceed?
Well, at this point in time, we just need a consensus of the commission in order to put it back on the agenda for
Correct.
next month as a first reading. And we'll have the full commission at that October meeting.
Well, doing that, and going back to Phil's suggestion, is hinting that possibly the whole charter group that should have been there working together before this came forward, if they wanted to come back and talk to us and give us their reasoning or what have you, then they've got plenty of time to do that, right? Because it's just going to be on the agenda for the first reading. So they could do
So
it
you're
as
saying-
citizens, so to speak.
Right, so you're saying they'll make their decision between the first and the second
If-
reading?
Right, if they
Well,
hear
I'd
this
agree
from
to
all of
that.
us right here, that that's a concern, and maybe they want to revisit it, or if they have a reason that whoever wasn't there might have a reason not to go for it, let them come forward and let us know. It's not going to hurt anything, right, putting it forward for the first reading?
I think that they would just have to speak as individuals
Right.
because the committee has been disbanded.
True.
Right, is no
That's
longer a
correct.
committee.
But as individuals, it's still an input to what, where we're going.
Sure.
They're, you know, learned residents, shall we say.
They were a powerhouse, that's for sure. Yeah, a great group. So I would be comfortable going ahead and saying moving forward, but inviting
all the members.
to your point, Phil, them forward to, give us their opinion on how or why they voted.
So do we have a consensus to move forward?
I would agree to that.
Okay.
Okay, good. And we got a majority to move it forward, and we'll put it on the agenda for next month.
And direction to staff to contact all of the members to
Yeah, and
attend. the
invite them
meeting.
to speak as residents
Sure.
at the meeting.
Actually, we have a super majority.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next person up is,
Moi?
Juan.
Well, it's actually coming on the end of I'm going to talk about the historic trees, which we actually do have something in our ordinance. Keeping Ocean Ridge green, literally and figuratively, is important for our special quality, the town, which I think I've heard a lot of that tonight. Throughout our agenda package tonight, there were documents, to Marty's package mostly, DOT, South Florida Water Management, all mentioning maximizing aesthetic and environmental areas, implementing Florida-friendly landscaping, conserving and enhancing significant natural features. So I've been looking at other small towns' landscaping issues and see there's a distinct attitude to try to conserve and enhance our special features. But that brings me to my point. As I look through our landscaping codes, I came across something that did mention historic trees, and it's basically about tree removal, replacement conditions, and exemptions. And the bottom line comes down to the fact that it says, any tree with a girth of less than 20 inches as measured at the base of the tree between 9 to 12 inches off the ground, except historic or specimen trees, is exempt from this code of the permit. So it's an exemption for historic trees, but we don't have a list of historic trees in our town. So how can we exempt them if we don't have that down when somebody wants to come in and get rid of it? And how would you know, right? It's just a tree permit for you. So therefore, I'm thinking that that might be something that we need to do, is put together an actual specimen list of our historic trees. I'm like an amateur horticulturist, so I've been noticing, plus I grew up here, so I've been noticing these trees for forever. And as I drive through, I can see what I would say 10 to 20 trees, just A1A alone, and that's without even really digging deep. So going up and down the streets, I think we could find a pretty darn good list. I spoke with the garden club, so that we don't have to really take too much staff time and effort and money to do this, that I could probably get some good volunteers, and we could start making a list on a map. I've spoken with 2 landscape specialists that said they would be happy to help me because they're up and down the street all the time here. And we could put together a list and probably need to have an arborist then look at our list. Are they really specimen trees? Are they really historic? Just being big doesn't necessarily make them what we need to keep. But once we put a list together, that would be step one in preserving and protecting these fabulous trees that would take 100 years to replace. So that's what I wanted to throw it out here for conversation and see how that sits with the commission.
Well, I know you have, I have one resident that would probably
I know, it was just so
like to-
perfect. Everybody's talking
like
about
to
trees
be on your
tonight.
committee for sure. Is anyone in the audience? Digby, would you have any comment?
No, I personally think that every tree has to be protected. You know, a specimen gumbo limbo is not a big tree, but it's a gumbo limbo.
It says historic and specimen it's
Yeah,
referring
so
to.
trees, it really is a list that should be completed and done. I absolutely agree with it. And at the same time, it's got to have a very, very good ordinance with it.
Right.
Because, you know, you get people, they have no respect for a tree. They don't realize it takes 150 years to get that size. They don't realize what cutting a tree down does to the environment. So I'm all for it. Absolutely 100%, and I hope it's a tough ordinance. And I hope that that tree that's been kind of butchered next to us, it will recover, and I hope that chap never has a chance again to cut it. So that's my feeling, and I feel very strongly about it. That trees are worth keeping, and, you know, bar you and Betty, I think I've lived the most in this town, 48 years. So I know it, and I've loved it. So, and done a lot for it. So I think it's very important that we protect our trees.
Thank you. Betty?
Begum, 1 East Ocean Avenue. Of course, I'm fighting for historic trees. I have 3 on my property that are easily that big. But I also think that, are there not some state statutes which tell you what size tree you cannot cut and what size limbs you can't cut off of historic, big old trees?
Oh, that's what we're gonna have to, that's what we're gonna have to do our research.
It sort of sticks in the back of my mind that someplace they said that it is illegal to cut a limb off of a tree that's more than a foot thick.
Well, I know that I've started to look at some of Lantana and Manalapan, all these other places, and see what they've got, and we can take, you know, what's there. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, because we're not the only people trying to protect our trees. And we do actually have, in some ordinances, we do have about trimming and things like that. We just need to tighten them up, but we can't do a thing if we don't have a list. So let's start with the list, is my thought. Okay?
Yeah, that arborist
Right.
was employed by the town. I'm afraid he's not a very good arborist. If he was employed by the town, it's shocking, because that is not the ficus he said it is. What? Yes, sir?
Sir, are you at the dais?
No, but I'm just making a comment, thank you. Now, I know this town quite well, and you can make little comments like that. Cheers. Thank you,
Charles.
Peter. Let's go now. It's like that.
With all due respect, Charles Kittler, 35 Hersey Drive. The problem is with a number of trees in this town, if you go to the FP&L, Florida Power and Light, you can't be within 8 feet of a power line. Now, they contract certain people to cut, and they cut back, but those trees still grow. But when you plant trees that grow into the power line that affect your neighbors, that cost them money during the last storm, and we already talked about more storms coming. What are we gonna do? We've gotta trim these trees back the right way. We've gotta plant the right trees there. We've gotta keep access to the power lines. I don't have to tell you about the problems we've had before. Certain people that won't cut back, but it happens in this town. Now, Florida Power and Light should be number one when it comes to a storm. I love trees, I love shade, but let's be smart about this, because we're all talking about higher water level, more storms. We've got to trim our trees back and take care of our neighbors.
Well, I think that's
Thank you.
probably one of the things that we need to
Right.
place in this, as we go forward
As we
with this
go forward.
ordinance, is where they can be planted, because I agree
Oh,
with
yeah,
that.
any new planting's a whole nother can of worms, and exactly right. We have even until we have sewer, we have septic in the front, so there's, we don't have
More
an option
trees.
of planting trees in front.
The more trees we plant, the less storms we're gonna have like this gentleman thinks we're gonna have. You know, power line, this tree we're talking about is slaughtered, had the power lines running right through it. Never affected anybody on our island. FPNL came and trimmed it nicely, just around it. They didn't do 8 feet. They did it nicely, sir. So I think we're raising things and scaremongering people like they did for this last hurricane. The scaremongering I hate, when people rely on scaring people, and that's not the way to legislate. Cheers.
Thank you, Dick.
Thank you, David.
Okay, do we need to do anything with your?
I just wanted to see how the.
Consensus to
Right, a
move forward.
consensus to move
Just
forward.
moving forward?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you for taking the time and doing it.
Okay, Commissioner DeJesus, it's your turn.
Okay, last but not least, we'll make this go very quickly, hopefully painlessly. Commissioner Hurlbert and myself recently attended a 3-day conference from the Florida League of Cities. It was their 93rd annual conference in Orlando. She and I did a little bit of a divide and conquer to make sure we could maximize our productiveness and learn as much as we could. There was a convention area that had a variety of businesses and different governmental agencies that offered services and resources to municipalities. We both spent quite a bit of time there. Here's just a smattering of some of the things that we brought back to staff. One was there was a municipal group that offered lower health insurance costs by actually conglomerating and packaging with other things. And although we missed it this year, they've already been in touch with the town manager. There was a really cool pet and people fountain, outdoor water fountain that we found that we really liked. There was something called the Florida Green Building Coalition, and they offered a checklist of initiatives that we could adopt and implement to incentivize green building, which takes it one step further. Preservation and enhancement of our natural habitat, since we're surrounded by mangroves and obviously the ocean and our dunes, and conserving water, and then homeowner and community education. I've already met with our building official, Wayne, and taking a look at some of those type of things. The Department of Environmental Protection was there. They discussed septic to sewer, and we learned that there's a section 319H of the Clean Water Act, which provides water quality restoration grants, which includes septic to sewer. So that was a great contact. And then last but not least, we met with, we heard the speaker, Drew Bartlett, and he is the new executive director of the South Florida Water Management District, and he talked about a $40 million cost share grant initiative for septic to sewer conversion. He gave out his phone number. I tattooed it on my arm, and I'm passing it on. So it was also a great time. We met with and spent a lot of time with our local elected officials in Highland Beach and in Boca. They both sent their entire crew. I spent a good deal of time with Mayor Grant from Boynton Beach, and we got to spend time with Ingenuity, our engineers, and Republic Services, obviously our waste management. Governor DeSantis was a keynote speaker. He emphasized the commitment to clean water and Everglades restoration and his commitment to home rule, which was nice to hear. There is the Cities 101 seminar. There was local government agencies and ADA compliance and ransomware. The good news is we're on a very good track there. One of the most entertaining speakers, which you would not think, was a lady from talking about the 2020 census. Although our town doesn't necessarily use a lot of the federal aid that is in the 162 programs and billions of dollars that the federal government passes back down to local municipalities. It was interesting nonetheless, and population count is really important, and their big news was that you are going to be able to do your consensus requirement via internet this year if you choose to do so. So there was a business meeting, there was resolutions passed, there was legislative action, priorities talked about. The information has been passed on to everybody on the dais. Anybody else within the audience, if you would like to have a copy, I'm sure the town would provide it. The new president of the Florida League of Cities has changed the focus, and it is on youth education of governments, and his tagline now is from readers to leaders. And I think it's actually going to be a pretty cool thing. We learned a wonderful new acronym. It's called CAVE. Citizens Against Virtually Everything. So I thought that that was really good. And last but not least, there is no conference that you can ever go to without the obligatory characterization. So I just thought everybody would enjoy that. So it was.
Oh, I wondered where that thing went.
You wonder, yeah. It was a great 3 days. I haven't been to a conference in a long time. My dogs were barking for sure after that. But I would definitely recommend that we go, on a routine basis, and actually enthused enough that we may want to consider joining the National League of Cities, which is only $550 a year. It would allow us the opportunity to tap into maybe some of their federal resources and contacts also. So, there you go.
Thank you for that. Well, I want to thank Phil, do you have any comments?
No.
Any further comments? Any of the other comments? I want to thank everyone for participating in the lively discussions this evening. I hope they were worthwhile, worth your time, for those that stayed. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And do I have a second on that?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you again.
Good job, Don.
Well,
You didn't beat the record.